My name's Donna Coffin, and I work for Cooperative Extension in Piscataquis and Penobscot counties. And we've had a lot of interest in irrigation on the farm, both for vegetables, fruits, and forages. And we have a new agriculture engineer, Dr. Sumon Datta, who's going to lead us in some information on irrigation, things to think about, and then we'll open it up for questions. If you have specific questions for your situation, he's willing to stay on and chat.
Yep.
I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks. I'll try to share my screen. Let's see. Okay, that's good.
We're seeing the slides. Yep.
That's good. Yeah, thanks, Donna, for arranging this webinar. So I'm Sumon, as Donna introduced me. I'm the Extension Ag Engineer for University of Maine Cooperative Extension. So today we're going to talk about how to plan your irrigation system, or how to understand basically your irrigation system for small scale farmers. So my background with irrigation is that I have been doing this stuff for the last 6.5 years. Since my time in Oklahoma State University, that's basically all I did, and I worked with a lot of growers over there, and I really loved it. So let's jump into it, and let's see how I can help you guys understand, or how I can help you guys extend your knowledge about irrigation. So if you are planning an irrigation system, or if you already have an irrigation system, there are some questions that you need to be clear about when you go to an irrigation dealer to bring your problems to them, or if you are just hiring them to install an irrigation system, what do they need to know? So the first thing is basically, what are the factors that affect your irrigation practices over the growing season? So that's really important. And then what do you need to know about these factors? So how do you interpret the understanding of these factors? And then what questions do you need to ask your design or installation company? So sometimes what I've seen is that if a grower is trying to install an irrigation system, and when he or she went to the dealer and he or she gave them some information, then they come back with a rough design, and they always have to modify it. So the challenge is, the gap is that in the first place, not all of the information was given to the irrigation dealer or engineer. So that actually adds a lot of time, and the installation gets washed out far into the future. So that's a really huge problem. And then how do you make a sense of the design decisions that were made during your talk with that irrigation dealer? So let's jump into it. To give you some background about irrigated agriculture in Maine, because we are here in Maine, but I know we have a lot of stuff, a lot of people from California, Mexico, Canada, and all over the place. But to give you some picture about Maine is that we have faced a 300% increase in irrigated acres since 1977 to 2017. So you guys can see, let me turn on my pointer. So you guys can see how it looks in 1997. We had about 9,000 irrigated acres. And in 2017, according to USDA, we have 32,000 acres. So the irrigation has expanded a lot. And those expansions are basically due to irregular patterns in rainfall. So we have some sort of climate change going on right now, and that's inducing droughts. And those droughts are causing irregular rainfall. So let's say, for example, in 1977, we used to get 48 inches of rainfall throughout the year. Right now, we still get 48 inches, but we get like 2 or 3 inches at a time, rather than spreading it around over the week or over 2 weeks, which is more beneficial for the crops. But getting a lot of rainfalls from at one time, it's actually not good for crops, because you go longer dry spells between water application or rainfalls. So that's why farmers are investing a lot into irrigation systems, so that they can tackle that lack of rainfall through supplementary irrigation. So what I've seen about expansion is that the Western and Great Plains, where most of the US agriculture is, they are not seeing any increase in irrigated acres, but Maine is, and also Vermont, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, all of the Eastern United States they are facing a lot of increases in irrigated acres. And the future expansion, they will basically outperform all of the growths in Western and Great Plains in the late 1960s. So irrigation is becoming more and more common here. But the challenges, as I've told you, we have increasing air temperature, and that might be that might be a blessing from God, because with increasing temperature, you can plant early, your growing period is longer, then you can grow more crops. But at the same time, you have droughts and irregular rainfall. So you have to invest in irrigation if you want to retain your crop production. So the stuff we'll talk about in this presentation is that we'll take a look at how all of these factors define your decisions made in irrigation system design. So the first one is obviously source of water. If you have groundwater or surface water, what is this capacity? How consistent is the source? And then the distance from the source to the point of application. How are you conveying that water from pumping source or water source to the point of application? What pumps are you using? How can you choose a pump that suits for your need? And then the size of the field, soil type, crop type. If there is a slope in the field, how do you tackle that? And what irrigation system is more suited for you? And also how the costs vary based on the materials used. And all of these factors will help you determine the cost of irrigation system, and then how much labor and time do you need to maintain this irrigation system, because maintenance is a large part of the cost of an irrigation system, and then how easy those irrigation systems are to use. So let me give you some background on how do you understand irrigation system. So we have some water reservoir here, or if we are drilling from groundwater, we have that here also. So we draw the water from here and we apply in the crop field, right? So there are two portions that goes in the crop field. So basically a portion of the water that you apply, it goes to beneficial crop water use, which is known as transpiration. So the plants that the water that plants actually use to produce crops, to produce biomass, to produce fruits. And then there is a large part which is known as losses. So the losses can be due to conveyance losses. There may be runoff if you have a large slope in the field. There may be some deep percolation. So deep percolation means that the water is seeping below the root zone to the groundwater or an underground water reservoir. So those are the losses that you want to minimize. And also another big loss in here that I didn't mention here is evaporation, because you have evaporation happening from the soil surface. So we want to minimize all of these losses while increasing the beneficial water use. So when we are applying irrigation, we have to be really careful about minimizing these losses. So that's how we get more yield, basically. So just keep in mind, the one part is beneficial water use and the other part is losses. And the beneficial water use is sometimes called, like most of the time, called transpiration. So the first one is source of water. So you have surface water and groundwater, right? So the challenge with surface water is that in a year like 2020, when we had a lot of drought in Maine and other parts of the US, the surface water reservoir was basically the level was fluctuating, right? So that highly variable water supply is totally dependent on rainfall. So if you get rainfall, you are good. If you are not getting rainfall, you are basically depleting that water reservoir through irrigation. And that leads to unreliable water supply during the summer. and you need most amount of water during months of July and August for your crops. And if you only depend on surface water, then this challenge becomes a real nightmare, and you cannot supply water for crops during those 2 months when the crops needs them the most. And the good thing with groundwater is that the water quality might be a lot better than surface water, and then it is reliable mostly depending on what type of aquifer you have. And then summer supply is mostly non-dependent on rainfall, because you get snow melt from mountains, and they come in forms of water in spring or before spring. So they go into the groundwater before the summer starts. So that's why the groundwater is not largely dependent on rainfall. But the challenge with groundwater is that you have to drill a hole, you have to find a casing for the water, and then you need to have a pump that goes in that pipe known as submersible pump, and that adds a lot of cost to your irrigation system. The other part of source of water is that it needs to have the capacity to supply the water you want to supply to your crops. So the capacity is mostly defined in gallons per minute. So we call it GPM, and the irrigation systems are most of the time designed based on seasonal peak. So seasonal means that let's say your crop growing season is from April to September. So that is your season. And the irrigation systems should be designed based on the seasonal peak and average. And you can actually get those data from USGS. So there is a page where you can get your areas groundwater levels from parts of the state and throughout the US, and you can get this data from there. And your irrigation dealer or irrigation designer, they can get it from there as well. Or you can have you can test if you want to drill a hole, you can test that, but it is more expensive rather than getting the data online. And the design is mostly done with the average in mind, but it needs to know the seasonal peak to factor that into the design. And the acres you can irrigate, it's actually based on this capacity. So the gallons per minute. So let's say you have a surface water reservoir that is 600 gallons per minute. It's its average water supply during the most demanding months of summer. So that means you can actually irrigate about 100 acres from that water source. So the relationship is that for each acre, you will need about 6 gallons per minute capacity during July and August. So that's how the irrigation design is done for source of water, depending on its capacity. And then the other important part is the conveyance. So basically the distance from your source to your point of application where you would be applying the irrigation. So that's so that can be done in forms of canals, pipes or conduits or poly pipes. So poly pipes are becoming more and more common because they are biodegradable, they are really flexible, they have good strength, and it's very cheap. The challenge with poly pipes is that it's biodegradable, so it degrades after 1 or 2 years. And that has become a lot more common in Mississippi and that part of the state, that part of the United States. But we don't see a lot of poly pipes here yet. But that is becoming a really good option for growers to intermittently invest in irrigation systems. But canals are more of a permanent thing. So you can see some canals here. But as you can imagine, due to the increasing temperature and droughts, the canals, although it may have some water, it will dry up during the most demanding months of the summer. And if you don't even account for evaporation, so the water will evaporate because of higher temperature, there is deep percolation. So the water will go down into the groundwater from those unlined canals. You can have lined canals with concrete, but those are more expensive, as you can understand. So most of the time for small scale growers, pipes or conduits might be a good thing to invest in, because it's not as cheaper as poly pipes, but it is cheaper than like digging new canals. So you can have some Schedule 40 pipes, and the diameter of the pipes will depend on your irrigation capacity, which is what we have seen here, the capacity of source of water. And also it will be based on the distance from point of application to pumping point, because you need to have enough pressure in PSI from your point of application to from your pumping source to your point of application. And in parts of the state like Maine and where we have a lot of elevation changes, these design has to be based on the elevation difference as well, so called elevation delta. So I know about a farmer in near Augusta, Maine, who has irrigation water supply about 40 feet down from his point of application. So he needs to have a pump that can pump that water from 40 feet below and then bring it up and then apply that water. So all of those information needs to be taken into account when you are going to meet a irrigation dealer. So give all of this information. They can design popular topic, selection of pumps, like how do you select pumps for your irrigation system. So the most two important variables in selection of pumps is their flow and pressure, and they are totally independent of each other, although they seem really dependent, but they're independent. So basically what independent means is that if you increase your flow, there may not be an increase or decrease in pressure. So the relationship is not linear, or there is no relationship basically. And most of the time, the choice of pumps, it's based on peak or maximum gallons per minute. So this is gallons per minute. So just for a crude example, let's say you need about 20 PSI at the point of application. So basically when you will apply your water, your crop field, and your crop field is about 300 feet away from the water source, where you have your pump. And this is a really common scenario for small scale growers, because they want to irrigate close to home, but their water source is far away. So in that case, you need to account for 1.3 PSI loss over 100 feet, each of the 100 feet of the pipe. So this loss is due to friction in pipes. So the pressure you will generate at the pump and the pressure you will be providing at your point of application, your irrigation system in your crop field, they are not similar. So there is a friction loss, and you need to account for the friction loss. And that means that you need a pump with 23.9 PSI capacity. So you need a pump with more capacity than the point of application. So this is a really crude example, and there are many examples available. And this is called a 3-step or three stage pumping scenario. So you have some screens that will basically block out water from there, and you have a pump here, be it either electric or diesel pump. And then you have some so you are lifting that water from here, from that point to this point of application. So this is called elevation lift. So because there is 3 stages, so this scenario is more common with most of the growers that we have here. And these are just some examples of different kinds of pumps you have. So this is a diesel pump, and you are basically drawing the water from far away, and you are applying that water through a diesel pump. The challenge with this pump is that it costs much more than an electric pump. And another thing is that you need to provide constant input, fuel input to that pump. all the time, and it is not green, as you can easily see. Whereas electrical pumps, they might need a little bit more space, but it is more greener, and it can suit most of the needs of small scale growers. So what I've seen with the diesel pumps or natural gas pumps, they are mostly for the large scale growers. So if you have a very large field where you need to build up a lot of pressure at the point of application, so that the pressure will not drop as you go far along the field, then you need a pump with larger capacity, and then the diesel pumps could help. But with these electrical pumps, I think for small scale growers, it will be much more than enough, because it can build up pressure easily, and most of the time it operates based on the generator or other types of fuel sources, and it can also operate based on the batteries. So it may be enough, but all of those information, and the sizing of pumps basically done on several factors. So do you want a centrifugal pump or jet pump? So centrifugal and jet pumps, those are the most common pumps that we have right now. And then suction lift pumps are mostly submersible pumps. So the pumps stay under the water rather than over the ground, and then they draw water and it sends the water to the point of application easily. And booster is kind of a suction lift pump as well. And then what type of power do you have available at the pumping source? Is it 120 volt or 220 volt? And what is your quality of water? Do you need a filtration? If you need a filtration, what kind of screens do you need? And then also, what is your largest amount of gallons per minute in your largest zone of the crop field? So let's say in the middle of the crop field, you have more biomass available, more irrigation, so it needs more irrigation. So you design your pump, or you select your pump based on that largest amount of gallon per minute requirement. And then basically your pressure at sprinklers and drips. So basically whatever pressure you will face at the sprinklers, this pump will be designed based on that. And keep in mind that, so if this is the pump, or if this is the pump, the pressure you see in the sprinkler, so it is very close to the pump, it will be much more different than you see at a sprinkler at the end of the field. So all of those informations are really important. And obviously we have been through this, the friction loss, that 1.3 PSI over 100 feet, over each of the 100 feet of the pipe. So that goes in the design as well, and the elevation. And your irrigation dealer or your state engineer, they will help you with selecting a pump using this chart. So there are many charts like this, but they all have gallon on one side and feet of water on the other side. And these curves that we have, those are the power of the pumps necessary for your particular scenario. So let's say we have a water source that (300 feet or 350 feet of lift. That means that you will need an irrigation pump that is about 125 horsepower. So the intersecting sections here. So that's how you determine the power of the pump needed to run your particular scenario of irrigation. So that's how they basically select the pump requirement, the size of the pump. Now we have some comparison between electric pumps and gas pumps. So gas pump means diesel or propane or any kind of natural gas components, and the PSI for electric pumps would be lower. So if at the point of application your PSI is lower, or if at the point of pumping your PSI is lower than 2000 PSI, then you can use electric pumps. Gas pumps can handle much more pressure than this one. Then the power from electric pumps, as you can understand, is less, and then gas pump is more, noise is less, the size of the electric pumps might be smaller depending on the application. The maintenance is very minimal for electric pumps. So once you install it, you don't need to maintain it every year. But for gas pumps with diesel engines, as you can understand, the maintenance has to be regular. The oil needs to be changed and everything. And then pricing is that something that's really depends on all of those other factors for electric pumps. It can be more than, so let's say you have a gas pump of 100 horsepower and a electric pump of 100 horsepower. It may be costing more than your gas pump sometimes, depending on the other factors that we have seen. But most of the time, the electric pumps will cost less than gas pumps.
Sumon, I just, this is Donna. I just want to mention that when I had the farm and we were irrigating the strawberries, we had a PTO pump that hooked to the tractor. So the power source was the tractor, and yes, that had to be maintained. But that's a little bit different scenario. So we didn't have to buy the engine with the pump.
Absolutely. Yeah, those engines needs to be all the time. They need to be serviced all the time. So that's the added challenge with these gas pumps or diesel engines or whatever have you. But electric pumps, they usually cost less, which is a good thing. The next, so this is a really important point of selecting your irrigation system. So is your soil irrigable? Is your land irrigable? So that's one of the most important parameters in irrigation system design. So we'll go through the factors that go into soil type, but I wanted to show you how you can get your soil type for your farm. So you can go to web soil survey. So that's a website with USDA NRCS, and it's a really good source of getting your soil texture or soil type. And we have actually done really thorough analysis on how this web soil survey bites with in situ sampling or soil sampling. It's actually really good. The accuracy is really good. So you can go to web soil survey and let's say, for example, this is your field and you are irrigating with center pivot. Then you can get your soil types. So what are the soil types? So we can see in this case, 88% of the soil is fine sandy loam, and it will give you the slopes and everything. You can take all of this information to the another tab they have in web soil survey, which is known as water management, and you can play with it a whole bunch more. So you can see your irrigation capacity if you had a micro irrigation, so basically drip systems or subsurface drip systems, and then if you had a sprinkler system, so that can be solid set or moving gun or center pivot or whatever have you. And then you can also have surface irrigation systems, which are furrow irrigation systems or border or basin irrigation systems. So you can play with a lot of it and get more information about your field. And the soil testing, they will cost maybe $20 to $30 if you sample like 2 or 3 places in your field. That should be more than good enough to get an understanding what your soil type is in your field. So if you have a loose soil type, which is coarse, textured, or sandy soil, then obviously it will have low water holding capacity, but good drainage, which is a good thing. But with the low water holding capacity means that you need to irrigate more often. So you cannot go longer periods in time without irrigating, because the root zone cannot hold much water for meeting the needs of the crop. And that design of the system should account for frequent passes. So your irrigation system should be able to irrigate more often compared to, let's say, for example, if you have a furrow irrigation system, then you may be able to irrigate maybe once a week. But with drip irrigation system, you can irrigate every day if you want. You can irrigate every day, zone by zone, and that will help your crops more. So if you have a sandy soil type, then your irrigation system needs to handle that load. So it should have capability to frequent passes. And if you have a heavy soil, tight soil, then obviously your water holding capacity is larger, which is a good thing. It can go as it can hold more water, it can go longer periods in between irrigations. The challenge with this type of soil is that if you apply a lot of irrigation at once, it cannot handle, the water will become runoff, and it may pollute your downstream or your water source, basically. So the water will not be beneficially used more if you have a clay soil and you are irrigating a lot of water at a time. So if you have a tight soil, the rule of thumb is that you need to irrigate, you need to irrigate a limited amount of water based on your soil water holding capacity. Means that how the water moves in the soil. So we have 3 examples here, which is loam, clay. I think we have a sandy soil also. So we have 3 soil types: sandy, loamy soil, and clay soil, and we'll see how the water from goes. Why is that? Okay, there you go.
One of the note that the move that the force
Oh,
was
that's
to
the
the
one.
attraction or penetration of the porosity derived from
So
cohesion.
yeah, this is
That the
the one.
depth of the irrigation.
So
It is
if
important.
let me turn on the sound. Okay, there you go. So if we see here, we have sandy loam soil on the left and loam in the middle and clay loam at the side on the right. So the water holding capacity of sand is lowest and water holding capacity of clay is highest. So you can see the difference when the soils are being irrigated. So let's see. So we are applying the same amount of water in all of these soils. And you can see with the sandy loam soil, the water has reached this depth. Whereas with clay soil, we are holding water here, which is close to the root zone, and the plants can easily use it. And sometimes the ideal situation is loam, because you can see with loam, it has more spread on the sides. If your plant was here and it has more spread on the sides, and it is also holding water much more. So if you apply the same amount of water in sand, it will become deep percolation mostly, and you need to irrigate more often. And your plants will not have a lot of water available in the root zone for it to uptake and produce fruits. Whereas with loamy soil, you can see there are more water available in the root zone, and plants can use it more beneficially. Let's finish this and we'll see how it goes. So yeah, so you can see how it performs. And if you are applying water here and your groundwater source is really close, that means all of the water you are applying, it is going to the groundwater, and that quality of water would be much more less than what you have at the point of application. So this type of water application is not ideal if you want to protect your groundwater resources, your drinking water resources. But whereas with clay soil, you can apply that water, and that water will be available for the plants to use. So yeah, just wanted to present that. So the other important part that goes with this figure as well is the topography. So do you have any slope in your field? So if you have slopes in your field, just like this, let me turn on the pointer again. So just like this picture. So let's say you are applying water from here, and then you have a slope in your field. All of the water you are applying, that is not being infiltrated in the soil. So it is not going down in the soil for the plants to use. So all of that water is running down up the hill, downhill, and you see water logging issues all around. So you need to definitely take account of the slope that you have in the field. How big is the slope? Most of the time, 1 to 3% of 3% slope might be okay if you place your irrigation systems and your nozzles, your sprinklers right. But with the slopey fields, what I've seen is that sometimes the drip irrigation systems work better because you can regulate pressure easily, much more easily in the field, and you are applying, most of the time you're applying subsurface with drip irrigation system or subsurface drip irrigation systems, and that water will not come up to the surface. It will stay at the root zone for the plants to use. So the slope is a really important factor when designing an irrigation system. And your pressure requirement of the pump and everything, the gallons per minute, the pressure, PSI, everything, they will impact your pumping size, the pump requirement based on the slope. And if you have a large slope, as you can understand, you need additional power to run the irrigation. And you can see if you have a situation like this, what happens to your sweet corn fields. So it will be waterlogged, and waterlogging conditions are not good for this kind of crops, the field crops, row crops. The other important part is the crop type. This term is known as evapotranspiration. So it's a combination of two terms, evaporation from the soil and transpiration from the plants. So this is how we estimate crop water requirement for a week. So let's say you have potato in your field, and during the most demanding periods of July and August, it needs maybe 1 inch of water per week. So your irrigation system needs to handle that load. And the vegetable crops with shallow roots will need more frequent irrigation because you don't have a large root zone to work with. So all of the water you are applying, it is seeping right through the root zone, and the plants will be able to use some of that water, but most of the water is going below. So you need to irrigate more often if you have a shallow rooted crop. And this also depends on the drought tolerance of the crop. A crop like cotton, which is grown more prominently in the central part of the US, it's more drought resilient, so it can go longer periods between the irrigation events. So all of this information, all of those designs, they are based on the peak crop ET. So it's in short, it's called ET. So whatever numbers you have here, the irrigation designer or irrigation engineer, they would be able to determine that number by looking at some publications or looking at the crops you have. But what if you have a bad year? What if you need to rotate your crop with something else? Does that other crop need more water compared to what you had primarily? So if you are planning your irrigation system, you need to account for that flexibility as well to accommodate other similar or more drought resilient or less drought resilient crops. So all of this information, you need to provide that to the irrigation designer so that they can design your system better. So different types of irrigation systems. So if you can go longer periods in between your irrigation events, then you can go for furrow irrigation events, which is one of the surface irrigation system. For furrow irrigation system, you can see an example here. You just basically using some siphons to draw water from the canal and applying water through there. You can create your furrow using your tractor. And most of the time, this type of irrigation system works well with potato production, where you need to raise a hill, or any kind of crops that are more drought resilient. But it has some challenges, and one of the biggest challenges it has is if you are irrigating a large field. So just imagine you are providing water here, and the water has to travel through this furrow to the end of the field. So if you have a large field or if you have a long field, then the water at the end of the field may not be meeting the crop water requirement, which is the crop ET of like similar to what you have here. So the water needs to travel to the other side of the field and adequately provide water to that end of the field. So this is one of the challenges with furrow irrigation system. Then you have, if you want to irrigate at a shorter interval, for example, if you have a vegetable crop or not as vegetable as carrots or spinach or broccoli, but if you have a vegetable crop like potato that has 2 feet rooting depth or 3 feet rooting depth or 4 feet rooting depth, then your sprinkler system might be able to tackle that easily. So because it can irrigate large fields, and you can set up these systems as cheap as $200 an acre to $1,500 an acre to install and maintain over the growing season and over its lifespan of like 20 to 30 years. The other type of irrigation system is the drip or subsurface drip. So you basically lay the pipe on the surface, or you bury it under the ground at a depth of like 8 inches or 10 inches. And with this type of irrigation system, you maximize your beneficial crop water use, which is what you should do, because you don't have a lot of losses due to evaporation from the soil surface, and you don't have a lots of loss due to deep percolation. So all of the water you are applying, it is staying in your root zone and available for your crops to use efficiently. But it has a cost. It runs upwards of $1,800 an acre to install and maintain. There are some challenges with this kind of irrigation system. Is like if you have a clogging, then you need to identify that clog, or if you have a leak, then you need to identify that leak. So there are challenges involved with all types of irrigation system. But if you have a vegetable crop that is highly profitable, and if you have a vegetable crop that has very shallow roots, then irrigation systems like drip irrigation systems, they can benefit you a lot in maximizing your profitability. So yeah, we are at the end of the presentation. So at the end of the day, you need to ask yourself, does irrigation pay in your farm? So you need to have a budget ready to determine if you are installing an irrigation system, does that show adequate return on your investment, like labor, capital, and management? If it does, then you go for irrigation. And with how the weather patterns, weathering events emerging towards more drier and drier period, then definitely I think the irrigation system will pay in your farm. If you have an irrigation system, even a supplemental irrigation system, then you can meet your crop needs in those demanding months of the summer. And the other part is that, can you obtain financing? So the financing is available from irrigation dealers. They can help you figure out which banks to go to, or there are USDA NRCS offices, and they actually help the farmers a lot. If you are an EQIP eligible farmer, so EQIP is Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So if you are EQIP eligible, then you can get a lot of cost share for installing your irrigation system, because I think the threshold for EQIP eligibility is if you have an income less than $900,000 a year, then you are EQIP eligible. That number might be north of 900, but I don't know. But look, your local NRCS offices, they would be able to help you a lot regarding this, regarding figuring out if you are EQIP eligible or not, and that will bump down your cost a lot more than what you can, if you have to pay all of it from your side or finance it from a bank. They will be able to help you a lot. So I think with that, I'll take any questions you have, and I'll share Laurie Ritter's contact information in the chat. She's the state engineer that helps farmers with setting up irrigation systems in the state of Maine. So for Maine growers, I'll just put that information in the chat box. And at the end of this presentation, you will be, I think either Donna will or I will send you a link for a short survey to just to understand how you are irrigating your crops in Maine or whatever you are from. So just to understand what your practices are. So I really appreciate if you take some time, 5 minutes of your day, and to finish that survey whenever you can. But with that, I'll take any questions, and thank you everyone for attending.
Okay, thanks. And I did put a link to that survey in the chat. So if they want to get it done quickly, that would be helpful. Other things that I put in the chat, we do have a Maine well water database. If your well was drilled, I think it was it starts in the 70s.
Okay,
And I put a link to the web soil survey also.